Chapter 7. What to leave in and what to leave out. And you might realize that both of those are equally important. We've learned a lot so far, and we are ready to actually compile our resume now. But there are some things that we want to take into consideration as far as what we're going to include and what we're not going to include in that resume. In this chapter, we're going to be covering those very topics, what you're going to include and what you're not. The first section is called Too Personal, and we'll just talk about some of the things that, again, you should and shouldn't include about your personal life. We'll look at the references that you want to include, and I'm going to show you how to select the proper references. I'll show you how to deal with black marks against your employment history. We'll deal with some specific black marks, and we'll even talk about paper quality and typeface. Then we'll look at your cover letter, which is, as your resume, an essential part of getting you that interview, and then we'll do a quick review. Now, one thing you don't want to do is get shy about listing your accomplishments. You want to give details and show them what you can do. If you were named Salesman of the Year, or maybe you saved the company that you worked for $3 million because of some new system that you implemented, you want to include that kind of stuff. That being said, be brief and cut to the point. You don't want to write an autobiography. Keep in mind the amount of time that these people have on their hands. So what about personal information? Well, it used to be considered desirable to include information like hobbies or interests, but professionals nowadays agree that it's not worthwhile. So if you like to go camping, that's great. It doesn't need to show up on your resume. Also, leave out self-reported positive traits like, I'm a hard worker, or I'm honest and dependable. Hiring managers see that kind of stuff so much that it doesn't mean anything to them anymore. Avoid overly used buzzwords, too, like organization or communication, teamwork, leadership, those kinds of things. Instead, you want to demonstrate your positive traits by showing your accomplishments. And if you can show the accomplishments that necessitated having those traits, that makes a more powerful statement. If you led a complicated project to completion and it was obvious that you had to be, the center hub communicating between a large group of people, they know you're a good communicator because you got the job done. So list your accomplishments, don't brag on yourself, and don't offer too much personal information. What about references? References are what we give out to demonstrate our character, our ability to perform certain tasks. In addition to your resume, you've got to prepare a one-page list of references. You're eventually going to need it. Okay, so you might as well put it together now. Even if they don't ask for it when you do submit the resume, you're going to need it. So to keep yourself from having to scurry around at the last minute, go ahead and get it ready. You want to have a list of 4 to 5 references complete with home and business phone numbers. You need to make sure that you get permission from these people first so that they're not, completely caught off guard when some hiring manager calls them up and starts asking questions about you. You want to let them know, make sure that it's okay, and by all means make sure that it's okay that you give out their work number so that they can be called, at their place of business. Your references are very important because they will help that hiring manager feel better about contacting you regarding an interview. If there are other people that are saying good things about you, that's going to make them feel better. Now, here's a list of common questions that a hiring manager is going to ask whatever reference you give them. And these are very important that you know them because you need to take these into consideration when you're picking who you're going to list for your references. How do you know this person? They're going to ask what the association is. Has this person ever worked for you? If so, when? What did they do? They'll ask specifics about what your job was. Why did they leave? They want to know, in what condition was the relationship when you left? What do you consider to be their biggest strengths? What are some of their weaknesses or biggest opportunities for growth? That's a nice way to put that. What is their relationship like with others? Can they work with others? Can they work in a team environment? Most businesses don't want somebody that can't get along with other people. So they're going to ask, do they get along with everyone? What are their biggest accomplishments? The reason that, again, like it's so important that you have these things in mind is if there are situations that you're very well aware of that people, maybe previous employers, are going to answer in a certain way when they're asked these kinds of questions, then you got to take that in consideration if you're going to use them or not as a reference. What's their time and attendance like? Do they use much sick leave? Have they ever gotten any awards or special commendations? You need to make sure that the people, I'm going to tell you later on a way that you can do this, but you need to make sure that the references that you use are aware if you have gotten awards or commendations. Have they ever gotten any reprimands or complaints filed against them? And would you hire them if you were me? That's a pretty straight to the point type of question. And believe it or not, these are very popular, common questions to be asked. So as you're reviewing possible candidates for references, ask these questions to yourself about how you think that they're going to answer. Based on what you decide there, you need to fine-tune your selection. Okay? And let's talk about 4 attributes that the best references are going to have. The first one is that their name is recognizable and respected in the community. Again, what we're talking about here is absolute perfect references. They have some detailed knowledge of your skills and accomplishments. That's very important. If you give somebody as a reference and they have no idea what you do and what you're capable of, that's not going to be a powerful reference because it's going to be more like, just a character witness. If they don't know what you can do, how are they going to offer, that, yeah, I would definitely hire them if they don't even know what you do? They generally have a positive attitude. This is very important because when they're dealing with the hiring manager, you want somebody that has a positive attitude. You don't want negative people to be in any way representing you. It makes a very strong impact. And they are verbally articulate. Are they able to relate what they're thinking and what they want to say? You might not think that's very important. But a reference that can't articulate, or maybe they're not very well organized, they're a pessimist, or they don't know, again, much about your professional career, they're a poor choice to represent you. Like I said before, your references can dramatically increase an employee's confidence in your abilities. So you've got to give this a good amount of thought, who you actually pick for this. Who's going to highly recommend you versus who's just going to, I recommend him. And I'll give you that tip for finding out who is really on your side. Ask them, if you're considering somebody for a reference, ask them for a letter of recommendation that you can keep on file. That way you can basically see what they're going to say about you, and you can kind of pick and choose who you ultimately select to submit as a reference. And another good tip that I wanted to share with you about your awards and anything that you've received, commendations or anything like that, go ahead and print out a list of all those rewards and give them to any references that you're going to use so that they have time to look at it and maybe, they can learn something about you that they didn't know. And if that happens to come up in the conversation, they can say, oh yeah, he's very good at that, because they've seen for themselves. And, don't just assume, even if it's a colleague that you know very well, don't assume that they're aware of your education and skills and abilities. So these are things that you want to do, things that you want to take into consideration to include in your resume. Let's talk about how we deal with things that we wouldn't necessarily want to include. We're going to talk about black marks. Fact is, they happen. If you're living and breathing right now and you've got a pulse, then you've probably done something wrong, something that you regret, perhaps. Maybe it was just something stupid that you did. Maybe it was out and out sinful, just something blatantly terrible. Maybe you got fired for stealing on the job. Maybe you've got a criminal record. You went to prison, and you'd rather not them find out about that. It's going to make it hard for you, right? Maybe it was something as sincere as you having to quit work all of a sudden because your dad had Alzheimer's and you had to go take care of him. That kind of stuff happens. Most important thing for you to do, and this might be hard for you, but the most important thing to do is if they ask you, tell the truth. Never cover up anything. Don't make excuses. Don't try to deny it. Don't try to shed, a good light on yourself and a bad light on somebody else that was involved. They have the right to know the truth because they're going to make a decision based on what you tell them. And God forbid you should lie and they find out later. That can get you into some serious trouble. Now, some things are going to stop you cold turkey at the door. You're not taking another step. If you've got a criminal conviction as a child molester, then you're not going to get a job in, social services working with abused children. It's just not going to happen. Really, stuff like that only makes sense. So you need to know, kind of be aware of the situation and don't waste everybody's time. If you know you've got a criminal record like that, don't even apply to the job. But there are other things that we maybe aren't sure of, things that we know have happened and they're kind of maybe embarrassing or they're bad and we learned a lesson from it, but we're not sure if it's really going to matter at that particular job. How can we find out just how black that mark is? Well, it's easy. Just ask them. You are going to ask them kind of covertly. Ask them if it's a big deal. Call them up. Avoid giving them your name or any contact information like that. Better yet, you can have a friend even do it, call for you. But you want to just plainly ask what their policy is in reference to your specific situation, your problem. If you had, for example, if you had a string of DUIs and you lost your commercial license, it got suspended or revoked or something, they're probably not going to be too interested in hiring you as a truck driver. But they might have other positions within the company that, that's not such a stringent rule. It's not something that is really that important to them as long as you're not behind the wheel. So just ask them. And I want to kind of bring up something here about your resume. Remember we went through the resume layout earlier? Well, in that layout, we've got, your professional experience, your education, all that kind of stuff. Is there any place in there, was there a section for criminal convictions? No, there wasn't. So in other words, don't create an artificial red flag. You don't have to throw stuff in there because okay, I know this is totally bad, so I'm going to put it in here. You don't have to do that. It's a resume. It's not even a job application. So there's no rules that say you have to offer that kind of information on your resume. It's much more preferred that even if you were to come, you have to get that interview. And if you were to come to the interview and they ask you to fill out an application and they blatantly ask you on there, which in some states they can and in other states they can't, but maybe they blatantly ask you, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offense? It's a lot easier to deal with that kind of thing face to face. Again, you're not going to lie. You're going to say, be honest. But it's easier if you're there at the interview to address it face to face. If you put something like that on your resume, you're probably not going to get the interview. I want to go ahead, though, and deal with some specific black marks, or at least potential black marks. Not everything that we think is a black mark is necessarily going to affect us negatively. And especially a key determining factor here is how we address it, how we deal with it. Termination. Again, always foremost importance, tell the truth. You got fired. Here again, your resume is not an application. That means you don't have to offer that kind of information. If you list the dates of your employment there's no, you don't have to say, I got fired from this job. You just list the dates that you worked. So you don't offer that kind of information. If it comes up on an application or in an interview, again, don't lie. State your piece and then leave it at that. Whatever you do, though, don't badmouth the company that you were working for at the time, no matter what the situation was. Recently left a job. Again, tell the truth. This is something that, if you don't do it, it'll haunt you for the rest of your life. If you just left the job, you might be tempted to list them. Like, maybe you left the job and you're kind of worried that if I tell them I'm unemployed, this and that and the other thing, you might be tempted to list them as a current employer. Don't lie. The hiring manager is going to check up on you. So always be honest. If he checks up on you and you say, this is my current employer, and he calls up and they say, hey, he doesn't work here anymore. Strike. That's it. They're not going to call you again. What if you got laid off? This one's real simple. If you were laid off because of, let's say, cutbacks, you don't need to put that necessarily in your resume. Don't put the reason why you got laid off. You don't even have to put that you were laid off. Just put the date that you stopped working there. Cutbacks are very common, so this isn't really going to be a black mark. And again, if it comes up, if you're actually in an interview, that's easier to explain that face to face. And again, cutbacks are not that uncommon nowadays, so that's not really going to be a strike against you. What about this one? Gaps in employment history, even major gaps. Let's say you've got really, really big gaps. You've got to be creative with that. You've got to, again, don't make up stuff, but you've got to kind of translate that for them. List constructive things that you did with your time. And if you're creative enough, you can even list that time as experience or as, something, again, constructive that you did. If you volunteered for anything, by all means, list that. Let them know that you were doing something besides sitting on the couch watching soap operas the whole time. Okay, let's say that you went ahead, you saved up a whole bunch of money, and you said, I'm just taking 2 years off. I'm going to travel the world. That's great. It's fine. You travel for 2 years. You don't want to list on your resume vacation. Don't put there, 2006 to 2008 worldwide vacation. That's not what you want to list. Find a creative way to explain what you did with a productive twist on it. Like maybe give yourself a title as a freelance photographer. In other words, list your activities in a positive work-related fashion. If you're going to travel the world, chances are you're taking pictures, right? You're gaining experience. Use that experience, especially, if it's something that can be tied in any way to the field that you're in. If, however, you did just sit around the house, on the couch watching soap operas, being lazy, then hey, it's time to get up and get busy. Now, if you've just got, short gaps, that kind of stuff is easy to fix. Switch from, don't show month and year on your dates of employment. Just switch to year. And a lot of times that in itself can hide little, short gaps like that. What if you're a job hopper? Like you've got 3 different jobs in 1 year. Well, it used to be not very long ago that people, they would actually work at the same company for like their entire professional career. As in, they get out of high school, they would go work at some company as an apprentice, and they would stay with that company until they retired. Nowadays, things aren't quite like that. It's acceptable if you have a new job every 3 to 4 years. So that's not a big deal. But employers still don't like to see a whole lot of, if you spend a lot of time jumping around, they don't like that because they're pretty much going to have to make an investment in you that could be a year or, thereabouts. Meaning that once they hire you, they're planning on perhaps a whole year going by before you're really productive. They are going to have to put you through some training. They're going to invest some, mentoring. They're going to try to get you to the place that you can really be productive for them. And a lot of times that does take, about a year. So if you're the kind of person that only hangs around for a year, then that's not going to be a wise investment for them, because they'll put forth all that effort and you'll be gone. What do you do, though, if you have had several jobs in the last 3 to 4 years? Well, one thing is you might consider just, toughing it out where you're at right now for a little bit longer, just so you can get rid of that stigma of being a job hopper. The other thing, though, if you're absolutely set on getting a new job, you have found that dream job, you've got to go for it, then you might consider switching. This is kind of a break in the rule, but you might consider switching to a functional resume, because functional resumes, you'll remember, they focus on skills. They focus on what you're capable of, not so much your work history. But bear in mind that that is not going to fool a very savvy hiring manager. They can kind of look between the lines, and they can tell. A lot of people use functional resumes for that purpose, so they might be able to tell that that's what you're doing. What if you were a stay-at-home mom or a caretaker? Maybe you've been taking care of Aunt Sally for the last couple of years. She had, terminal cancer or something. Now you've got to get back out into the workforce. What they're going to be looking for is that you have kept up on your industry, that you know what's going on. And this is pretty important. If you're planning on getting back into work, then obviously you do need to stay abreast of what's going on. Show them, demonstrate training or conferences that you went to in that time. Show them any part-time work that you did, maybe even consulting that you might have done. Let them know that you're still, you've been somewhat active as much as you could, considering whatever situation brought you into this. Tell them about trade magazines, periodicals that you've subscribed to, books that you've read, software that you use on a regular basis, so that they know that you're still, current. And here again, if you haven't been doing that, if you've been, sitting around for a year actually not getting involved, that's going to be pretty tough. So you better get busy. What if, though, your potential black mark is a little bit tougher? What if you've got a criminal background? Here again, you want to do a little bit of research. Number one, in a lot of states, it's actually illegal for them to ask you if you've been convicted of a crime. So you need to find out, if you're in one of the states, that that's not legal, so that you are aware of the potential risk involved. It's good to know if I don't have to necessarily worry about this too much, because they're not supposed to ask me that. So find out how likely it is that they are going to ask you. Your resume, remember, is designed to emphasize what you can do for a company. It's not just to share past indiscretions. That's not at all the purpose. You want to show them what you're capable of. Don't mention this kind of stuff on your resume. There's no reason for it. Another thing that kind of helps is most resumes don't go past 10 years. So if, you had a prison conviction that was 12 years ago, relax. You're probably not even going to have to deal with that. Let's say, though, that you do get an interview and it comes up in the interview. Don't spend a whole lot of time on it. Answer it honestly. Again, don't try to make excuses for yourself. Don't deny it. Note that you have learned from your mistakes, and then leave it at that. Always be honest. You can, however, especially if you can tie this into the job that you're applying for, you can tie in any experience that you had even while you were in prison. Let's say that you were head of the kitchen there. That's management experience. And you, by all means, can give yourself a title, show the times that you were there, even if it was like a 10-year prison term, and tell them your position and what you did, your accomplishments. Treat it like any other job that you would have had. And I'll tell you, sometimes it is hard to get, that first job after you get out of prison. Try it for a while. And if you're still having a hard time, you might consider going to get some job assistance from the town that you live in or from the state that you live in, because they'll have a list of employers who are more willing to give people a second chance in life and give you the opportunity, to prove yourself. Up next is appearance. Appearance totally matters. Your cover letter, which we're going to talk about later, your resume itself cannot contain spelling or grammatical errors. That is a killer. Even if you're extremely bright and intelligent and talented, if your resume has mistakes like that on it, you're going to look dumb. I'm just being blunt. You're going to look incompetent. So where do you think they're going to file your resume? That's right, in the round filing cabinet at the end of their desk. HR people are only going to spend 1 to 3 minutes screening your resume and sorting it, deciding whether or not you're going to be, submitted to the next phase. So appearance is critical. You want to double and triple check your resume. Look for errors. Check your contact information. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure there's no, typos in there. And then print it out and compare what gets printed with what you had on the screen. Reason for that is sometimes from the computer to the printer, special characters like, bullet points or something, they can get kind of tweaked in the translation and they won't necessarily show how you intended them to be. So print out the copy of it, hard copy, and give that the same kind of scanning attention to make sure there aren't any errors on it. And after you have quadruple checked it, give it to somebody else, a friend that you trust, that they can go through it and they can go, quadruple check it again, because a lot of times what happens when we're scanning something, we're proofreading, is maybe we miss something, and for whatever reason, the brain kind of flags that area as already being checked. So even if you read over it a whole bunch of times, your brain won't let you see the error because it's subconsciously saying, I've already checked that. So you won't see it. So another set of eyes a lot of times can find things that you didn't. Don't rely on your computer's spell checker either. There are a lot of mistakes that computers just won't pick up. The word to, which can be spelled T-O or T-O-O, it's got to be used in the correct application. Okay? And computers a lot of time won't catch things like that. So not only, don't just look for squiggly lines on your screen and think if there's not any, you're golden, because that's not the case. Read everything and make sure the correct spelling, grammar, and everything is being used. Paper quality and typeface. This is something that people they have a lot of misconceptions on. They think you got to get this super duper nice, fancy, expensive paper, or maybe some colored paper, because a lot of people think, well, if your resume is like pink or blue or something, it stands out. And yes, it does stand out and it makes an impression, but it's not the kind of impression that you want. When you use a colored paper like that, they get the impression that you don't really take your job very seriously. So just a standard, good quality, white or ivory printer paper is going to be all you need. Keep the fonts simple and easy to read. You do not, under any circumstances, use, some creative or fancy fonts. It's got to be easy to read. Times New Roman, Century Schoolbook, Verdana, those kinds of things are good choices. If you want to get, let's say you want to get a little bit creative, fine. Use Verdana for your titles and use, Century for the body of your resume. That'll make it look nice, neat, and professional, and yet maintain that easy readability that we need. Fonts like Times New Roman, they may seem a little bland, but they're the serifs, make it easier to read. It helps guide the eyes, and that's what's the critical. You don't want them staring at your resume and having difficulty reading what the characters are. And I know there are some fancy fonts that are easy to read, but don't do it, okay? Just take my word for it. You also want to stay away from Arial, just because With Arial and any similar font like this, capital I's look exactly the same as a lowercase l. And the reason that that's a real difficulty is because a lot of these companies are going to be using electronic scanning to scan your resume in and then do searches through it to classify your resume, find out if you're qualified for the job, if they should even move you on to the next phase. And, obviously swapping an I and an L can be bad news for a resume as far as understanding what word is being discussed there. Use a size that's easy to read, but you don't want it to be so big that it looks like you're trying to just, take up space. So generally, 10 to 14 points is good. If you're using Times, though, in Century, a font that has serifs, avoid 10. It's a little bit too tiny, and it makes it more difficult to read, at that small size. But obviously above that, 12 to 14, you're golden. Go ahead. Don't overcrowd. You want a double space from, separating descriptions, and you want a double space between sections. That makes it easier for the human eye. Remember, they're going to go through there and scan your resume quickly. So if you double space, that kind of helps break things up, and it's easier for them to jump from one section to the next and try to find the information they're looking for. Now, the dreaded cover letter. Most people dread writing a cover letter, but it's something you absolutely have to do. HR staff are expecting to see one. Your cover letter is really almost as important as your resume itself. It tells the employer what position you're interested in. It tells them where you heard about the position being open. And it tells them what you feel you're going to be able to offer the company. A good cover letter will take you to the next stage, but a bad one is going to take you to the trash can. It's going to totally put you out of the race. Your cover letter has to be perfect. That means, again, quadruple check it. Then have a friend quadruple check it. You cannot have any grammatical errors. It has to be a real tight layout, really nice and neat looking. Literally, it's got to be perfect. Here's some don'ts. Don't complicate a simple thought by overwriting. I can't tell you how many times I've read something that in one sentence it was clear, but the more they started talking about it, the more they wrote, it got more confusing. So don't overcomplicate things. Don't be overly emotional or intellectual. Don't use sarcasm, derogatory statements, or silly humor. Your cover letter is not the place for those kinds of expressions. Don't use cliches or trite, overused descriptive phrases. And don't pepper your talk with heavy-duty words that you can easily do without. Let's look at some do's. Do introduce yourself. Tell them how you heard about the opening, and by all means, tell them what you feel you can offer the company. And make sure that you fit all of that into one page. All right, so we've written our first draft. We've got all of our, I's dotted, T's crossed. Everything is in place. Once you've created that draft, ask yourself and a friend. You want to submit this to a friend as well. And ask them these questions that you're about to see. If you can answer yes to every single question, then you're ready to move on to the next step. If you can't answer yes to something, then you need to stop and correct that specific problem so that it becomes a yes. Okay, here's your questions. Again, ask yourself and a friend. Is the resume clean looking and nicely formatted? Very important. Visuals are important. Is the resume free of typos, misspellings, bad grammar, and inconsistent punctuation at the end of each section or bullet? Let me just explain something to you here. If, let's say you've got your professional section and you've got some bullet points there and you end every sentence with a period, then later on in your education section, you've got some bullet points and you leave the periods off. Looks bad, okay? Be consistent. Is there enough white space to make the resume readable? You don't want to cram a whole bunch of stuff in there so they can't get around. You don't want to make it intimidating looking. Is the resume clear, interesting, and enjoyable to read? Make sure you're not boring them with information that's not pertinent. Are key points bulleted and easy to read with the main point listed first in each bullet? And does each bullet begin with an action word? Remember what we did earlier in another video. Use action words to start your bullet points. Led, increased, things like that show that you did something. Is there a brief executive summary in place of a career objective statement? Does my resume include industry standard keywords separated into a unique section? Is the top half of the first page engaging and compelling? A lot of what we're talking about right now is review. We have gone through this in detail in the training, but this is essentially a checklist for you to make sure that your resume matches up with every single one of these points. Because if it does, I think I can hear the phone ringing right now. Okay, here's some more. I'm not quite done yet. Do my past accomplishments jump off the page, and are they measurable? Are my accomplishments tied to an existing need or desire of the hiring company? Very, very critical. If you've done your resume reconnaissance work, then you have found out what, if there's something specific that they're looking for right now, something that they're needing help with that you have experience with. Will my resume make someone want to know more about me? Does my resume demonstrate multiple examples of the 2 to 3 major skills that the company is looking for? Remember that I said it is better, instead of listing 10 skills that you have, it's better to showcase 2 or 3 of those skills in multiple places. So pick some of your best skills and show them examples of where you utilize those skills. Show them several examples. Can the reader quickly see my position titles and where I've worked? Did I stay away from text boxes, unusual symbols, tables, and other non-standard formatting which would make the resume difficult to scan? If you can answer yes to every single point, then you're headed straight for the finish line. You've got everything that it takes to attract the human eye, but you're not quite done. There is still, in this modern age of technology, there is still a foe that we must consider. A lot of companies nowadays are using electronic scanning to help classify and sort the resumes that they get. They get quite a few of them, so that kind of helps alleviate a lot of time and frustration. So we're going to be covering that in the next chapter. But let's have a quick review. Don't offer information that isn't helpful or necessary. This does not mean that you're lying. It just means that that's not what a resume is for. A resume is designed to teach them what you're capable of doing for them. So simply not including some information is by all means acceptable. However, don't lie about black marks. Do utilize every possible aspect that you can. Again, like the example that I used of someone being in prison. If you spent 3 years in prison in the mess hall as, the head chef or whatever, you can utilize that in a positive way. Visual appeal is vital. The layout has to be right on. Grammatical, spelling errors, all that kind of stuff has to be totally, completely eliminated. And then we are ready to tackle the next problem, which is the electronic scanning that we have to get past. So that'll be in the next video.